Hello, and welcome in. It's the first video in the history of this channel. Quick introductions are in order, not going to take up too much of your time. I'm Dev, and I'm usually a huge Magic the Gathering kind of guy. Been playing it for over a quarter of a century. At this point, when did that happen? God, I am old, and it's kind of become the thing that has defined me at this point in my life. I got a little YouTube channel over here that's got over 100,000 subscribers where I talk about Magic the Gathering. I really like Magic, in case you haven't sussed it out yet. But lately, over the last month or so, I have been playing the heck out of the Pokemon TCG again for the first time in like 15 years, and I've been really enjoying myself, and I want nothing more than to talk about that with some friends. So here we are. Enter Obsidian Flames, which comes out here in the States on August the 11th and has been fully spoiled at this point. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the top 10 cards in the set, as well as the top 10 sleepers and the top 5 most overrated cards in this whole set. So that is so much to go over. We got to go ahead and get to it. But let's get started with my honorable mention for the top 10 cards in the set. It's rhyme time, you slimy mimes. This is one of those supporters that draws 3 and then does something else. But in this case, the gravy's pretty good. You get to switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. Now, they get to choose the new active Pokemon, like an escape rope type effect, but I still think this is going to be pretty good approximately 50% of the time. The other half of the time, it's going to be really awkward, which is why it's all the way down here at the honorable mention. But I felt like it was worth pointing out. But let's pivot now to my honorable mention for the sleepers in the set. And this time, look, it's Whizcash. I'm going to go ahead and admit to you and myself, more importantly, I think, that this card is just bad, like objectively terrible. But I think that the honorable mention slot in the sleepers category is a pretty good spot for cards exactly like this that are just bad, but there might be some like niche thing that you can do with them. And I think Whizcash is a pretty good candidate for that. This is a stage 1 evolution. It costs 4 energy to do 140 damage, which could be worse, but it certainly could be better, right? I'm more interested, however, in this first attack. For just 1 fighting energy, apparently it's called Rock Wildly. For each fighting energy attached to this Pokemon, you discard the top card of your opponent's deck. Let's go. So if I get like 5 fighting energy on this guy, I just get to mill my opponent for 5. Probably just a much worse Wugtrio, and Wugtrio is already like terrible. So I don't know what I expect from this guy, but I'm probably going to try to do something terrible, fail miserably, and never play him again. Let's jump back over to the top 10 real quick and take a look at number 10 proper, which is Toadstool EX. This is a 270 HP stage 1 EX, which is about a normal amount of HP, but it has a cool ability called Protective Filament. Prevent all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to all of your Pokemon that have energy attached. You can also, for just 2 green, do Colony Rush, which is 80 plus damage. It does 40 more damage for each of your benched Pokemon with green energy attached. So for only 2 green energy, you get to do a maximum of 280 damage here, which is pretty good. But of course, it takes some time and energy to set up, literally, right? Now, you've got stuff like Cherim in the format to help you get energy on your guys. Gardenia's in the format. We're about to have Gita as well, so it shouldn't be too hard to set this up. And I also like the way this is worded. It doesn't care what kind of Pokemon the energy's on, so long as the energy is green. So, you can have a Radiant Greninja out or something like that. So long as they've got green energy attached, it'll account for this attack. But let's hop back over to the sleepers list and take a look at number 10 over there. It's only Cologne. Now look, you'll note, especially if you watch enough of this content, that the first few slots on the sleepers list tend to be for cards that are probably kind of bad, but I still kind of like regardless. And Cologne is in that category. For double turbo energy, you get to pick and choose, which is flip 3 coins, put a number of cards up to the number of heads from your discard pile into your hand. So even if you only flip 1 heads here, you still get to grab something from your discard pile, put it back in your hand. That's not too bad, but obviously the best case scenario is that you get to get 3 cards from your discard pile and put them in your hand, an average of 1.5. I can imagine there's going to be some like slow roll, single prize control type decks that might be interested in something like this, but it is a stage 1, and it's not really too impressive outside of this 1 attack, and even this 1 attack isn't actually that impressive, so I'm not sold on it, but I do think it's cool. That'll do, Pig. Let's jump back over to number 9 on the actual top 10 list here and take a look at Scizor, or Scizor? I always used to call him Scizor when I was a kid, but it's probably more likely that it's really Scizor. But this too is a stage 1 evolution. It has 140 HP, and for 2 metal energy, you can cut for 70 damage. That's not too bad, but it's not too great either. The thing I'm interested in here once again, is the first attack. For just 1 metal energy, Punishing Scissors does 10 damage, but it also does 50 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play that has an ability. There's a lot that this is decent against, right? Lost Zone Box with all their Comfies, and Radiant Greninja, or just any deck that runs Radiance, right? All of those have abilities. That's pretty cool. Decent against the Miraidon deck that not only has Miraidon itself, right, but also has like Raikou and stuff like that. Decent against Mew V and all of its Genesects that have abilities. So there's a lot that this actually can do. Like a $110 against at the very least, and sometimes it's going to do like a $160 for just 1 energy. And there's going to be even other boards where it does even more than that, just all for the cost of 1 energy. Sucks that this is an evolution. I really wish that it was basic and just, you know, dip the HP a little bit, maybe 120 HP, and we can still do all these same things. It's fine, but I really don't want to have to clog my deck up with Scythers just to play this Scizor, but I still think this is a really cool attack that I'm going to pay some attention to. It's up to you whether or not you want to, but I think it's worth doing so. Let's drift on back over to the sleepers list. Take a look at number 9 over there, which is Seismitoad. Again, first few slots in the sleepers list, not the best cards, but interesting cards. And Seismitoad is, if nothing else, super interesting to me. The ability is Quaking Area, which just sounds a little inappropriate for a family game, right? But as long as it's in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon attacks cost a colorless more. That's not too bad. Now, the attack here is just 2 water energy for 120 damage, and during your next turn, this Pokemon's Echoed Voice attack does 100 more damage. So the attack actually isn't too bad on this either, right? 120 the first turn, 220 the second turn. That's not too bad for only a couple of energy invested, but of course, this is a Stage 2 evolution. Rare Candy is a thing. You'll hear me say that a couple of times, but Stage 2 is an actual thing you have to point out. It does tend to make cards legit worse, and in this case, I think we're looking at that. But this is a really interesting ability, especially paired with another Stadium that's in this set that also makes attacks cost more. So you can really kind of just fog your opponents out, lock your opponents out of being able to attack for multiple turns, and that's kind of nice in these, again, these slow roll kind of control-y box kind of decks, and I think this might have something going for it, but again, the fact that it's Stage 2 is really holding me back. Number 8 on the main top 10 list, I think you figured out how this works by now, is decidueye. I don't love this dude, but 320 HP on an EX is not the worst thing in the world. Again, this is Stage 2, so temper some of your expectations, right? But I just really like the ability here. Once during your turn, you may use this ability. Well, thanks, Pokemon. If this Pokemon is on your bench, switch it with your active Pokemon. Or if this Pokemon's in the active spot, you switch it with one of your bench Pokemon. Hunting Arrow costs a green and a colorless. It's 130 damage. It also does 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So again, just a couple of energy here to do a decent amount of damage, and then also extra damage to benched Pokemon. So not the worst attack in the world, but again, really what I'm attracted to here is the ability to hop back and forth between active and bench. I think that's really, really nice. You could just say effectively this is a free retreat cost, but I think it's much better than that. It also effectively makes anything inactive have a free retreat cost so long as this is switching in. So I think there's a lot of cool things about this, and probably some tricky stuff too. I like it. Now, number 8 on the sleepers list this time around is Letter of Encouragement. I want to have faith in this card. I really do. It's a trainer. It's just an item. You can play this card only if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Search your deck for up to 3 basic energy cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, shuffle your deck. So I don't think this card is great. I keep saying that about sleeper cards. We'll get to some sleepers I do think are good. I promise. But this one I do think has some niche applications, which is, again, often where these sleeper cards are right at home. In decks like Chenpao EX, perhaps your Letter of Encouragement seems pretty decent after something gets KO'd to just go into your deck, get 3 more, and have Baxcalibur throw it onto something. Again, the same thing with Cherrim applies here, right? You can chair them out. You can just throw these down so long as they're grass energy. So again, I think there are niche applications with Letter, but there are probably just way better ways to do this. I think like Raihan is just a much better card, even though it's a supporter and this is just an item. I don't know that you end up playing this too often, and it probably rots in your hand until one of your guys gets KO'd, and that doesn't feel great. But there are applications here, and I think it's important to check those out. But let's go back and look at the main list, see what's shaking over there real quick. We got to look at a much, much better trainer, and it's Town Department Store, or maybe more simply Town Store. I'm not really sure what the real translation on this is yet, but once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a Pokemon tool card, reveal it, put it in their hand, then that player shuffles their deck. Pretty cool little stadium right here. Let you go get a bunch of stuff. I've had a lot of Mountain Dew in my life, so I've given myself enough stones, but the fact of the matter remains, you can go grab stones with this, which is a really sweet application, right? There's also the fact you can go get like choice belts, defiant bands, and stuff like that. You can go get the plus 50 HP to a basic candy. I'm completely whiffing on the name of it right now, but there's a lot of different tools you can go get with this, right? Energy share, experience share, and stuff. So really interesting little thing right here. There's a lot of stadiums being played right now, so I'm not sure that you're going to get more than like one use out of this before opponent just wipes it with their own stadium. That said, you're also giving your opponent the ability to go search their deck for stones and stuff, so double-edged sword here, but I still think that this is going to be pretty good more often than it's bad. But number 7 on the sleepers list is Metal EX. There's something about this guy. He's just a stage 1 EX and has 300 HP, which is pretty decent. For a metal energy, the first attack is metal absorption. Search your deck for up to 2 basic metal energy, attach them to this Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. For 4 colorless energy, you get full metal knuckle, which is 90 plus damage. 90 base, and it does 30 more damage for each metal energy attached to it. So if you activate this attack with exactly 4 metal energy on the Pokemon, that's 210 damage. If my math is correct, I'd be very embarrassed if it's not. But that's not a bad amount of energy, and considering what his first attack is, you know, he can probably attack for the full Monty of metal energy on the second turn that he's in play. That ain't bad, right? And the more you pile onto him, the more damage it's going to do. So before long, you're doing 240, 270, 300 and knocking out, you know, things like VMAX or whatever. So that seems pretty good. And you've got stuff like Magnezone, or Magneton rather. I think it's actually Magnezone, excuse me, that allows you to like look at the top 6 cards of your deck and throw steel energy around onto anything you want to. So it shouldn't be too hard to get this stacked up with metal energy and just deal a bunch of damage. I like this thing a good bit. I've been looking for another decent kind of big attacker for the Magnezone kind of Dialga deck, and this could slot in, or it could just be a dream. Probably more of a dream, but I at least want to try it out first. Let's check out the main list again and look at number 6. We're getting into some really good stuff now because we're looking at Glamora EX. Now, this is a stage 1 again and has 270 HP. Not super impressive, and neither is the attack, to be honest. It's only 2 fighting energy. It's not bad. It poisons them and does 140 damage. Again, could be worse, but it could be better. Now, the ability, that's what everyone's talking about. Dust Field. As long as this Pokemon's active, your opponent can't have more than 3 benched Pokemon. If they have 4 or more benched, they got to discard until they have 3. If more than one effect changes the number of benched Pokemon allowed, use a smaller number. Now, this is pretty cool. It works pretty well, I would say, probably, right? Against decks like Miraidon and Lost Zone Box that need these like highly developed benches with all 5 Pokemon doing a thing. So really, really cool in this meta right now. Same thing against Mew decks that need like, you know, a second Mew and then like 3 or 4 Genesect V on the bench. So there's a lot of decks right now that really need a bunch of stuff going on their bench. So awesome card right here. And you can do switch tricks too, with switch, escape rope and stuff like that, where you kind of just like surprise put this inactive to shrink their bench when need be. And I think that's really cool. I don't mind this being a stage 1. If it were a stage 2, I'd have a lot more to like be mad about, but as a stage 1, I think this is a perfectly serviceable Pokemon. Let's check out number 6 on the sleepers list, and if there's one thing you need to know about me, it's that I have a soft spot for one prize basics. I just really like a decent one prizer that's basic and has some tools, and I think we have that in Bouffalant, just a little bit here, 120 HP on a basic that you can stick double colorless to and actually do some damage. And it has an ability. It's called Boofer. It's hilarious. This Pokemon takes 20 less damage from attacks, so it kind of effectively has 140 or 160 HP, right? Depending on how many times they have to attack it down to actually kill it. But the double colorless here is Damage Rush. 50 plus damage, flip a coin till you get tails. The attack does 30 more for each heads. Now, I'm not going to live in magical Christmas land and say, like, you're going to flip 4 heads in a row and do 600 damage or however much that is. It's a sizable amount of damage, but just flipping like 2 heads in a row gets you a pretty decent amount of damage too. Let's scoot on back over to the main list. Take a look at Mawile here, a steel Pokemon. I always say steel. It's a metal Pokemon in the card game. So weird. But anyway, Mawile is a basic with 90 HP, and you can do 90 damage for 3 energy, which is whatever, but again, the ability is what I care about here. It's Special Eater. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may discard a special energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. Nice, with the Rapid Strike decks and all the double turbo going around to like every deck, reversal energy and stuff like that, gift energy. There's just a lot. There's a lot, right? From Jet Energy, V-Guard. I mean, there's just so much special energy running rampant in this format right now. This will probably find some kind of target here or there. So I just want to point this thing out. I don't think it's super impressive, but I do think it's a nice little tech piece in this meta for the Dialga decks, if nothing else. But for number 5 on the sleepers list, let's take a look at another single prize basic. I told you I really like these. It's Entei, and this looks pretty decent, just 130 HP. But could be worse on a basic, right? It's got an ability called Pressure. As long as it's in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks do 20 less damage. Look at that. Some pretty similar to the Bouffalon we looked at a couple of seconds ago. But you can also, for triple colorless, do Blaze Ball. This is 60 base damage, but 20 more for each red energy attached to it. So if you've got 3 fire energy attached to them when you activate the attack, that's 120 damage, but I guess you could stick double colorless to them and like 1 fire energy and just do 60. That's also an option, but I want to stick a bunch of fire energy to them, and it's not that hard. There's stuff in this format like Armorage that lets you move energy around or whatever. There's Magma Basin, so as long as Entei's on your bench, you just or Entei, that's probably more correct. You just throw energy onto him, and suddenly he can attack for, I don't know, like 1 billion when you finally get to attack with him. So if you are trying to find like a decent fire energy basic for like the Arcanine deck that Pokemon Live TCG starts you with, I could see this being a nice little thing to slot in. It's really not that bad. Now over here at number 4 on the main list, we've got Tyranitar EX, which is one of the first cards in the main list that I really don't like its placement. Like, why is it all the way up here at number 4? It's just kind of normal, right? But this, I've been told, is not the best set in the world. Sucks I started right before this set, but one way or the other. I've been told this is not as power-packed as a lot of sets have been over the last couple of years, and that means that cards like this are going to be just barely out of the top 3, so I guess it does check out a little bit. Now, Tyranitar EX is a Stage 2 evolution. That's pretty high up there, but it does have 340 HP, which is a buttload. I think it's a scientific term of HP. The first attack is Mountain Bash. For just a single fighting, you do 120 damage and you discard the top 2 cards of your deck. But for 2 whole fighting energy, that is really not that much. You get Thor's Rampage, 150 damage, but if any of your benched Pokemon have any damage counters on them, the attack does 250 damage instead, and it is not too hard to get damage on your own Pokemon, right? Now, of course, you can do it because your opponent attacked them. That happens in games of Pokemon, but there are plenty of other ways to just get damage on your Pokemon, and then suddenly you have a 340 HP Pokemon that can do 250 damage for just 2 energy, and that's really good stats. Really good in terms of just raw numbers here, but again, Stage 2, and I'm not sure that it's actually as impressive as I'm making it out to be. We'll see. Now, number 4 on the sleepers list is Houndoom EX. This thing looks pretty cool to me, man. Just a Stage 1, 270 HP, and for 2 dark energy, you get Evil Claw. It's 90 damage. If the defending Pokemon is a basic Pokemon, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. It also has Hound Fangs. It's 3 dark energy for 220, does 30 to itself. That can knock out a bunch of really important Pokemon. 220 is an important number right now, so do remember that. But I really like this first attack. 90 damage isn't the most, but it ain't nothing either. But the fact that they just can't attack if they're a basic Pokemon, that seems halfway decent. There's a lot of kind of basic V Pokemon in this format right now. Not sure it goes anywhere. A lot of the decks that are running Dark right now just don't have room for this and the Houndour, for that matter, that you'd have to run. So I'm just not really convinced about it, but I do think this first attack is super cool. Now for number 3, we're in the top 3 of the main list here. Let's take a look at a card that I am almost certainly overrating. It's Gita. Ladies and gentlemen, La Primera. Until the end of the turn you play this card, none of your Pokemon attack. So it doesn't end your turn, right? But you just can't attack that turn. Search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards, attach them to one of your Pokemon, shuffle your deck. This card looks broken and it just busted in half, man. This card looks really, really good. On the first couple of turns of the game especially. Later on in the game, this card does not look very good. But on the first couple of turns of the game, I can see engineering this, especially if you go second and you get to play a supporter turn 1. I can see this card being just freaking phenomenal, right? But I do think you have to temper how many you actually put into the deck. You hear me actively talking myself out of the card at this point, but I do still think that it's hard to pass up on 2 basic energy of any type and attach them to a Pokemon. That seems really, really good to me. Number 3, top 3 of the sleepers list, everybody. It's Ice-Q EX. This is a 210 HP basic EX Pokemon. You pump 3 water energy into it and you get Piping Hot Block. That's 160 damage, boy. You discard an energy from this Pokemon. But here's the cool part. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't attack. So, again, this can be easily outdone with switches and escape ropes and stuff like that. Just retreating their Pokemon. So, this isn't going to be as cool as I want it to be, like, a bunch of the time, but at least I can admit that. Again, this is going to wall some folks out, and I like the idea of bossing something up and then making sure that it can't attack, right? So, if you don't knock it out with the boss, after you bosses it up to the front. So, if you're not going to knock it out, I could see doing this to make sure that not only can it not retreat because it doesn't have a whole lot of energy on it, but even if they are able to like throw a double turbo or 1 more energy on it to get it to attack, it still cannot do that. I think that's pretty cool, honestly. And again, for these like control-y kind of decks, I think we're getting a lot of cards in the sleepers category. But let's take a look at number 2 on the main list. It's Pidgeot EX. I hope I'm not a big old Pidgeot for falling for this one because this too is a stage 2 evolution. How good is that? Again, I just have to point out that Rare Candy is a card in the format. I'll do that at least one more time before this video is over, but still, with Rare Candy, I think this could just be so much better, right? 280 HP, not super great actually on a stage 2 EX, but still it's some HP. For 2 colorless energy, you can double turbo it, you get 120 damage, and you can discard a stadium in play. Not the worst thing in the world, but the ability quick search. We've seen this, from what I hear, on Pokemon in the past. Once during your turn, you can demonic tutor, Magic players. Isn't that ridiculous? Once during your turn, you may search your deck for a card, put it into your hand, shuffle your deck. You can't do more than 1 quick search ability each turn. That's just pretty busted, man. I mean, they do make you jump through some hoops by making it a stage 2 evolution with relatively low HP. I feel like I have to point that out again, but just the ability to tutor for any 1 card a turn. I mean, come on, man. People play like Forest Sealstone in their deck to be able to do it literally once per game. So I think this is pretty ridiculous, especially given the fact that literally any deck can play it and it gets charged up with just a single double turbo. So, and with double turbo, it still does 100 damage. That's not nothing. So I don't know, man. I think this is really sweet. I like that it's a May ability on the stadium discard in case you have a stadium. So really did think of everything, didn't they? Even the fact that this is a stage 2 just doesn't keep me from loving the card. I think it might actually be the best card in the set. But for now, we're putting it at number 2. But we are at number 2 on the sleepers list, baby. It's Grumpic, everybody. It's 120 HP on a stage 1 evolution here. It's a 1-prizer. I think that's important. It's got an attack that does 100 damage for 3 energy. Keep that in mind. You can even double turbo it. It's all good. But this first attack, Power Step, for just a single psychic energy, search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. Then shuffle your deck. Okay, so Arceus being in the format has really made us reevaluate how we look at stuff like this. This would normally be like halfway decent, and I dream about it and stuff, but the fact that Arceus is basic and just is better, just a better card than this. And any deck can play Arceus. This needs to be psychic and all that. Yeah, like it destroys this card's playability. But that said, this is a 1-prizer, okay? And you can attach energy to your Pokemon any way you like. They don't have to be V Pokemon, which is kind of neat too. So this has some things going for it Arceus doesn't have. But again, Arceus has higher HP. It has an attack that actually does like pretty decent damage. It gets 3 energy rather than just the 2. I mean, it is a better card, and I'm not denying that. But Grumpic is interesting both from a budget standpoint, if you can't afford an Arceus, and if you're trying to do some like slightly different stuff. I could see Grumpic actually working. Now, heads up, we are not going to adhere to the usual structure. I'm going to stick with the sleepers here, so I can go ahead and give you my number 1 sleeper before I give you what I think is the best card in the set. But at this point, I think it's pretty self-evident if you know anything about this set. But number 1 sleeper here is Toga Kiss. I don't really hear anybody talking about this. That's probably because it's a stage 2 evolution with like extraordinarily low HP for a stage 2 evolution. But I still think This is worth pointing out, more than worth pointing out. For one, it can double turbo to do its only attack, which is Power Cyclone. That's 110 damage, or I guess 90 if you've got that double turbo on it, but 110 damage, moving energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. I like that any deck can play this, and as a matter of fact, any deck can play any stage of the Togepi evolution. Everything from Togepi to Togetic to Toga Kiss all use colorless energy, so they can go in anything, and I think that's neat. Most of the time, you're not going to play Togetic, I would imagine. You're just going to rare candy to Toga Kiss, but you're going to do that for this ability, Precious Gift. Once at the end of your turn after you attack, you may use this ability. Draw cards until you have 8 cards in your hand. 8 cards in your hand. That is a lot of cards. I just think it's something you want to keep your eye on, man. It's a cool card. Now look, before I get to number 1, I feel like I should address the fact that there are times when bias can be a real thing in top 10 lists, right? I mean, there are cards that I have loved since I was a kid. There are chase cards that I've loved since I was a kid, and I hope that's not influencing my decision here. All that said, Charizard EX is the best card in the set, and I'm pretty sure that's objective. This is 330 HP for Stage 2 Evolution, which is, again, not the best thing in the world, but rare candy exists. I think I'm done saying that at this point in the video, but 330 HP isn't too bad. It's got this ability, Infernal Rain. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may search your deck for up to 3 basic fire energy cards, attach them to your Pokemon any way you like, and then shuffle your deck. And then for just 2 fire energy, that's all it takes, you can Burning Darkness for 180 base damage. That ain't bad by itself, but it does 30 more damage for each prize card your opponent has taken. Again, really hope I'm not mistaken on the math here, but I've got it written down right next to me. Apparently, if your opponent's taken 5 prize cards, that's 330 damage total, which is a pretty important, HP figure when it comes to a bunch of different VMAX in the format right now. This also works with that new Entei we looked at in the sleepers list, right? Throw a bunch of fire energy on it, you get to deal more damage. So a lot going for this Charizard right now synergistically, and just like in a vacuum, it's got relatively high HP and a ridiculous attack for a very low energy cost. This is a good Pokemon, and I don't think I'm surprising anybody with my number 1 pick here. But before we get out of here, quick bonus content. Let's look at these top 5 most overrated cards in the set to my mind. Now look, I've been doing this for a month. That's as long as I have in this game. So maybe I just don't have any idea what I'm talking about. But some of these, I see multiple people on YouTube or on websites and stuff point out, and I'm just like, why do you like that card? For instance, Trevenant at number 5. This is a 140 HP Stage 1 evolution that can do 100 damage for 3 colorless. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat, but the ability is what people are talking about. As long as it's active, you put a damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon during checkup. So between turns, that's effectively 2 damage counters, I guess, right? You say go, they get a damage counter. They say go, they get a damage counter. That seems okay, and as long as you're able to wall your opponent out from attacking or dealing too much damage, then this could stack up, and I could see it going well in decks like Meowscarada, decks with Radiant Alakazam and Hawlucha, and setups like that. So I'm not saying the card is terrible. That's why it's all the way down here at number 5 and overrated. I do think there are cool things about this card, but I don't think it's anywhere near as strong as I've seen a lot of people rate it. Number 4 most overrated is Absol EX. I see a lot of YouTubers pointing this thing out, and I'm not really sure why. It's got 210 HP on a basic EX, and it's also got Future Sight. For just a single dark energy, you look at the top 3 cards of either player's deck, put them back in any order. You can also do Curse Slug for 3 energy. It's 100 base damage. If your opponent has 3 or fewer cards in their hand, the attack does 220 damage suddenly. So that's not too bad, but that's also actually just about baseline. It can knock a bunch of stuff out, but it really depends on your opponent and what they're doing. And I don't, as a Magic player, typically like cards that give your opponent any kind of agency. You might try to screw your opponent on a decent draw, but between the Comfies and Radiant Greninjas and Bibarels and the supporters that Professor Oak, did I say Professor Oak? Professor's Research and Ionos and the Draw 3s and all that stuff, I just don't think this thing is that big of a deal. You can put them back in any order if you want to. They're still going to draw them next turn. Number 3 is Revok EX. I kind of do like this guy a little bit, but I'm still going to be kind of hard on him here. He's a Stage 1 EX with 280 HP. Could be better, could be worse, and the ability is the cool thing here. It can have up to 4 Pokemon tools attached to it. We've already seen stuff like this in the past. Apparently, it hasn't made too many waves. You know, I'll say that the attack is okay, right? For 3 energy, you get 170 damage, and during your next turn, your opponent's next turn, Revok will take 30 less damage from attacks. That's not so bad. It effectively kind of gives him more HP. I like stuff like that, but ultimately, I don't think this is that good. You know, it's like it can have tools attached to it. Kind of big whoop, in my opinion. I just don't think that it's that cool. I think it's a little bit exciting, but I just don't think it goes in too much. Number 2 most overrated card is Pokemon League Headquarters. Now, I'm not saying this card is bad. I don't think this card is necessarily bad. I just think that it's super overrated. There's a difference between those two things. I see a lot of people pointing this out as like one of the better cards in the set, and I don't really get it, man. I think it's kind of a trap. This is a stadium. The attack cost for each basic Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, is colorless more. Now, the first thing about this that I want to point out is that when you play this, you're playing it on your turn. That's how Pokemon works, which means you'll be the first player this affects. That sucks. But even more, what sucks is that most decks play stadiums right now. So it's entirely possible this affects you on your turn and then does not affect your opponent, either because they play their own stadium or because they, lost vacuum it or whatever. There are definitely niche applications for this, especially in those kind of slow rolling control decks I keep bringing up. But ultimately, I think that it is more of a trap than it is a good Pokemon card. And finally, number 1 most overrated card in the set, again to me at least, is Cleffa. Now, this, first of all, only has 30 HP. You're kind of asking for it. But everyone's freaking out because it has a free attack called Grasping Draw. Draw until you have 7 cards in your hand. Now, look, this ends your turn. I am nowhere near as impressed by this as I think I'm supposed to be. I mean, again, I'm a Magic player, and somehow I'm still, after just a month of Pokemon, jaded enough to know that this card is probably not as good as it looks, but maybe it's even better than it looks, and I am super off base on this. Who knows? But one way or the other, personally, I just don't think it's as good as everyone says it is. But I guess end of the day, we'll see, right? But one way or the other, that I think is all I have to say in this video. It was an awful lot. I probably could have just split this into 3 videos. That's what they tell you to do. And I really just wanted to get all this out in one big extravaganza. So let me know how you felt about it. If you're a subscriber to the Strictly Better MTG channel and you moseyed on over here and subbed to this one, I really appreciate you for that. If you're brand new and you've never heard my silky, buttery voice before, consider giving this channel a subscribe. I'm going to try to put a video on this channel every 2 weeks, mostly budget content and cards that maybe deserve a second look that we haven't looked at, stuff like that. I eat stuff like that up. So if you do too, give this channel a sub. Aside from that, basically donezo for this onezo. I haven't really worked out an outro for this channel yet. I probably should have done that. I mean, my branding is pretty bad too. Haven't done enough for this channel. Like, what is this logo? It's terrible. But one way or the other, I think that's all I've got to say for this one. So I'll catch you cats later. I am Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching. Spread love and be kind.